Part 1: The Calm Before the Storm. Seattle mornings have a rhythm of their own. The gray drizzle softens the edges of the city, and the scent of coffee blends with the faint saltiness from Puget Sound. I remember the first Sunday I realized something was off. My wife, Emily, had always been meticulous. Her hair perfectly framed her face, her laugh light and careful, her routines consistent. But that morning, she lingered over her phone, a subtle tension in her posture. She smiled at nothing, and when I asked, she looked startled, almost guilty, before replying, "Just work messages." I nodded, but unease settled like the mist outside our apartment. Part 2: First Doubts. Weeks passed. I started noticing little things: her phone locked when she left the room, sudden changes in plans, long absences she couldn't quite explain. Our conversations became a dance around topics, with awkward pauses and hurried smiles. One evening, over homemade salmon and roasted asparagus, she laughed at something on her phone, quickly putting it away when I reached for a glance. That laughter was different, lighter, secretive, as if someone else's presence lingered in it. Part 3: The Small Clues. Seattle rain fell heavier that week, the streets reflecting neon signs like fractured glass. I noticed a lipstick stain on a coffee cup she had used, not hers, darker, bolder. My stomach knotted. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, maybe a friend, a leftover stain. But when I found a receipt from a boutique I didn't know, time-stamped for a time she said she was working late, doubt knotted me. I started watching the patterns, the comings and goings, the hidden moments. Part 4: Emotional Turbulence. I confronted her gently, almost pleadingly. "Emily, is there something you're not telling me?" Her eyes widened, then softened with practiced calm. "You're imagining things." "I swear, nothing's going on." But the tone didn't reach her eyes. In that instant, I realized trust wasn't just about belief, it was about presence, and hers had been elsewhere, invisible yet palpable. Part 5: The Investigation. I began to trace small inconsistencies, like a detective piecing together a puzzle. Emails that didn't match her story, an unfamiliar perfume lingering in the hall, a borrowed book returned too soon. I cataloged them mentally, each tiny anomaly an arrow pointing somewhere I dreaded to look. I watched from the window as she left the apartment late one evening. A black sedan, unfamiliar, waited. She slipped in, waving at someone unseen. Rain streaked the windshield like tears I didn't shed. Part 6: Confrontation Brewing. Our apartment felt colder, the Seattle dampness seeping into our conversations. Emily noticed my withdrawal. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice fragile. I couldn't answer honestly. How could I? Every word felt heavy with accusation, every smile a mask. Sleep became uneasy dreams of betrayal mixing with the persistent sound of rain tapping on the glass, a soundtrack to my growing obsession. Part 7: The Breaking Point. Then came the moment I could no longer wait. I followed her one Thursday, the streets slick under amber streetlights. She met a man under a street lamp near Pioneer Square, laughter echoing despite the drizzle. They kissed. My chest tightened, and for a moment, the world blurred, the city, the rain, the night. Walking home, I replayed the image over and over. The betrayal was no longer a shadow, it was flesh, it was tangible, it was real. Part 8: The Emotional Dialogue. The next morning, I confronted her. Seattle seemed unusually bright, the sun cutting through fog like truth. "Emily," I said, voice shaking, "I saw you yesterday." Her face went pale, then blank, then slowly crumpled. Tears welled, and for the first time, her carefully constructed facade broke. I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered, voice trembling. "It's complicated." We argued, voices rising and falling with the rhythm of our pain, each accusation echoing against walls that had once been warm. I felt years of trust dissolve in hours. Part 9: The Fallout. Days passed like wet paper through my fingers. I avoided her gaze, wandered through Pike Place Market, the seagulls screaming above the water like my own inner turmoil. I had choices: forgiveness, confrontation, or leaving. She tried to explain, but the words were hollow. The city's gray skies mirrored my heart, muted, stormy, and indifferent. I realized some wounds aren't meant to heal quickly, some betrayals aren't meant to be forgotten. Part 10, The Emotional Climax. I packed my things one Sunday morning. Emily stood at the doorway, rain dripping from her hair, face etched with regret. "I love you," she said, voice breaking. But love, I realized, had become a fragile illusion. "I loved you too," I replied quietly, "but I can't anymore." I walked out into the drizzle, the city sprawling and indifferent around me. Seattle absorbed me into its gray embrace, the rain washing away what I had lost, leaving only memory and the sting of betrayal. And somewhere in that mist, I felt a flicker of freedom, painful, yes, but real. Part 11, After the Rain. Seattle felt emptier without her. The streets, usually bustling with tourists and commuters, seemed muted, the rain-soaked sidewalks reflecting my loneliness. I wandered through Capitol Hill, watching people laugh under umbrellas, and wondered how our laughter had disappeared so quietly. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Emily's favorite cafe, the corner where we once held hands, a bookstore where we shared quiet afternoons. They were beautiful and tragic, relics of a past I could no longer touch. Part 12, Ghosts of the Past. At home, I couldn't escape her memory. Every drawer, every photograph, seemed to mock me. I found a scarf she'd left behind and inhaled its scent, not her perfume exactly, but a ghost of her presence. Sleep became fragmented, dreams mixed her laughter with the image of her betrayal. The city's fog mirrored my mind, obscured and suffocating. I began questioning everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and myself. Part 13, Unexpected Encounter. One rainy evening, while walking along the waterfront, I saw her, Emily, across the street, talking to the same man. My chest clenched, but curiosity drove me closer. She didn't see me. They laughed, sharing a closeness that made my stomach turn. I realized that part of me still wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but another part, wiser, or perhaps just tired, wanted only to turn away. Part 14, The Letter. Back in my apartment, I found a letter in the mailbox, not from her, but from someone claiming to know the whole truth. It revealed that Emily had been struggling with feelings she didn't understand, a secret long before I noticed. Anger and confusion warred inside me. Part of me wanted to destroy the letter, another part wanted to keep reading, desperate for insight into her mind. Seattle rain tapped on the window as I sat on the couch, letter in hand, heart pounding. Part 15, Conversations with Friends. I started confiding in my closest friend, Mark, over cheap whiskey at a dimly lit bar. "You can't live in her shadow forever," he said, eyes serious. I wanted to believe him, but the betrayal lingered, thick as the fog outside. I realized I had been clinging to an idea of her that never truly existed, and part of healing meant letting go of both her and the illusions I had built around us. Part 16, First Steps Toward Healing. I took a long walk through Discovery Park, listening to the waves crash against the shore. The city's gray tones felt less oppressive here. The salt in the air, the distant cries of seagulls, reminded me there was life beyond Emily, beyond betrayal. I started small, returning books, walking in places we used to avoid, talking to strangers. Each step was slow, almost painfully deliberate, but it was movement. I was trying to reclaim myself. Part 17, A Glimmer of Hope. At a local art gallery, I met someone new, a woman named Claire, with sharp eyes and a warm smile. She didn't know my story, and I told it carefully, like handing over a fragile artifact. Her kindness was quiet, unassuming, but it stirred something I hadn't felt in months, trust, or at least the possibility of it. Seattle's neon reflected off puddles outside the gallery, a metaphor for something fragile and beautiful emerging from grayness. Part 18, Confrontation Redux. Emily eventually called, her voice tentative. "Can we talk?" she asked. I agreed, not out of longing, but out of a need for closure. We met at a small cafe, rain pattering against the windows. She apologized, her eyes honest this time, and explained the tangled emotions that had driven her actions. I listened, not with the intent to forgive, but to understand. Sometimes understanding itself is enough to begin release. Part 19, Closure. I left the cafe feeling lighter, a strange weight lifted. Seattle's streets glistened under the late afternoon rain, the city alive and indifferent. I realized that while betrayal could wound deeply, it could also illuminate resilience. Emily was no longer a part of my present, only a shadow in the past. I had made space for myself again, to breathe, to live, and to eventually allow someone else in. Part 20, The New Beginning. Months later, I found myself back in Capitol Hill, the rain gentle, the streets warm with the glow of street lamps. Claire walked beside me, sharing a quiet laugh. The city still held its gray moods, its drizzle, its fog, but it no longer mirrored my sorrow, it reflected possibility. Seattle had been both witness and accomplice to my heartbreak, and now it was witness to my healing. I had survived betrayal, pain, and doubt. I had emerged stronger, ready to embrace life's unpredictable beauty once again. Part 21, Lingering Shadows. Even after months, some nights were restless. The city's rain became a companion, a metronome for memories I couldn't shake. I would walk along Elliott Bay, staring at the dark water, replaying the betrayal, the confrontation, and the fragile hope that followed. Shadows of Emily lingered in my thoughts, though her presence had vanished from my life. Part 22, Signs of Life. Seattle began to feel alive again, not just the city, but me. I returned to the gym I had abandoned, reconnected with old friends, and even started writing again. My apartment, once cold and hollow, felt warmer as I filled it with art, books, and small plants. Life slowly stitched itself back together, one tiny act at a time. Part 23, Unexpected Revelation. One rainy evening, an email appeared in my inbox from someone I hadn't expected, Emily. She confessed that the affair had ended months ago and that she had sought therapy to understand her mistakes. Her words were careful, regretful, and raw. I read and reread them, a storm of conflicting emotions churning inside me. Relief, anger, pity, sadness, all mingled. Closure was within reach, but I realized I had grown beyond needing it. Part 24, A Familiar Stranger. At Pike Place Market, I ran into the man she had been with. He didn't recognize me, and I didn't approach. Instead, I watched him interact with the vendors, laughing easily, unaware of the chaos he had caused. A strange sense of detachment washed over me. My anger, once sharp and consuming, had dulled. Seattle's streets reflected puddles of my own growth, murky yet shimmering with newfound clarity. Part 25, Reflection. Late at night, I wrote in a journal, chronicling the journey I hadn't fully acknowledged: betrayal, heartbreak, recovery. Writing became cathartic, a way to untangle emotions too complex for conversation. I realized that pain can teach as much as joy, and that survival is sometimes a quiet, unremarkable act. The city outside remained gray, but inside, I began to feel color again. Part 26, Claire's Presence. Claire became a steady presence. We shared long walks through Green Lake, quiet dinners, and conversations that didn't feel like obligations but like discoveries. She didn't replace Emily, no one could. But she reminded me that trust, once shattered, can be rebuilt carefully, with patience, humor, and small acts of care. Part 27, Echoes of the Past. One day, a friend mentioned seeing Emily at a cafe downtown. I felt a flicker of old emotion, pain, curiosity, regret, but it passed quickly. The past had its echoes, but I no longer belonged to them. Seattle's gray skies, once oppressive, now felt like a canvas for life's unpredictable brushstrokes. Part 28, Professional Shift. Work became a sanctuary. I poured myself into a new project, one that required creativity and attention to detail. My focus sharpened, and I felt a sense of accomplishment that had been absent for too long. Success, I realized, wasn't a cure for heartache, but it was a reminder that life moves forward, even when we feel stuck. Part 29, Unexpected Friendship. I reconnected with Mark, my old friend, over a quiet dinner. He reminded me of the strength I'd shown, the battles I'd survived internally. We laughed about old times, teased each other, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely lighthearted. Seattle's rain tapped gently against the window, a rhythm not of sorrow, but of endurance. Part 30, Acceptance and Peace. Months turned into a year. Emily faded fully into the past, a chapter that had taught me more than I ever wanted to learn. Claire and I walked through the quiet streets of Ballard one evening, rain misting softly around us. I felt calm. Betrayal had shaped me, but it hadn't broken me. Seattle, with its fog, rain, and endless gray skies, mirrored the journey from pain to strength. I had learned to carry the past lightly and embrace the present fully. Part 31, Uneasy Calm. Even with Claire by my side, some nights were restless. The Seattle rain, once soothing, now felt like a mirror to my unease. Memories of Emily, her laugh, her betrayal, her absence, crept in uninvited. I walked the empty streets, wondering if closure was truly possible, or if it was merely an illusion we create to survive. Part 32, A Shadow Reappears. One morning, a mutual acquaintance mentioned seeing Emily at a gallery opening. My chest tightened, a familiar ache resurfacing. I debated calling her, confronting her, or simply letting it go. The rain blurred my vision as I realized that moving on didn't erase the past, it simply made it bearable. Part 33, Confrontation Within. I spent hours alone in the apartment, staring at the city skyline. Seattle's gray towers seemed indifferent to human suffering. I confronted myself, asking why I still felt anger, longing, and confusion. The truth was clear: betrayal leaves permanent marks, but acknowledging them is the first step toward true freedom. Part 34, Claire's Support. Claire noticed my withdrawal. She didn't push, didn't ask too many questions, she simply walked beside me. One rainy evening, as we watched reflections shimmer on wet asphalt, I realized I could trust again, cautiously, without erasing the scars. Her presence was a quiet anchor, stabilizing me in turbulent waters. Part 35, The Letter Returns. Out of nowhere, another letter arrived, this time from Emily herself. She apologized once again, not for the affair alone, but for the pain she had caused over months. I read it silently, feeling neither anger nor relief. Instead, I felt neutrality, a detachment that had taken months to achieve. Seattle's drizzle outside matched the letter's bittersweet tone. Part 36, Revisiting the Past. Curiosity drew me to our old apartment, now empty. Walking through rooms that had once held laughter and tension, I felt a sense of closure. Each empty corner was a reminder that life moves on, that memories are possessions we carry lightly or leave behind. Part 37, A Professional Challenge. Work demanded more than ever. I took on a challenging project that forced me to focus fully, leaving no space for lingering resentment. The satisfaction of problem solving, combined with quiet victories, helped me rebuild a sense of self-worth that had eroded during the heartbreak. Part 38, A Test of Trust. Claire suggested a trip outside the city, to Mount Rainier. The journey tested my willingness to trust, to open fully without fear of betrayal. Snowflakes melted on my gloves, wind howled through the pines, and I felt an exhilarating freedom. The mountains, majestic and indifferent, reminded me that life is vast, far beyond personal sorrow. Part 39. Unexpected Closure. One rainy evening, Emily sent a final message: "I hope you find happiness." No explanations, no justifications, just acknowledgement. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Seattle's gray skies reflected the calm I felt inside. The past had released its hold. Part 40, Moving Forward. Months turned into a new year. Claire and I walked along the waterfront, hand in hand, watching the sun break through a rare clear sky. The city still drizzled occasionally, but it no longer symbolized heartbreak, it symbolized life, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from surviving betrayal. I had been wounded, but I was whole again, ready to embrace whatever came next.